Focus on relationships and not information. What's up, friends? I'm Chad Brooks. I'm a congregational developer in the Louisiana Conference. Now I'm at this church, and I want to talk about how you integrate new people into the life of your church today. This is a thing that I have more conversations about than almost anything. I typically work with normal-sized churches, around 60 to 80 people, and they're struggling to understand what congregational vitality looks like inside of just a normal-sized church. They always come up with the same thing, like, hey, Chad, we need more people. And yes, that is the answer. I think that any church that's following the Great Commission knows that they need to be consistently reaching new people. But where they always have questions is about two things. One, Chad, how do we invite people? But two, once they come, what are we doing, or why are they not coming back? We're going to talk about that second thing in this video today. Also, I write emails almost every week to local church pastors serving in normal-sized churches that are asking questions about growth and church stability. I would love to send them to you. If you want those emails, just go down to the description below and you can subscribe to that. I feel like the first thing we have to talk about is a lot of churches just aren't that intentional about how they follow up to new people. Sometimes they're living in an older model. I grew up, I'm a preacher's kid. My dad was a Southern Baptist pastor. I was at a church of around 1,000, at least, growing up with him, very much in church world. And this is the way things used to work in the church world back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and 2000s, is that, one, people had a solid, firm idea of what denomination they belonged to. So if they moved to a new town, they would find the closest church that was that denomination, and they would go and attend that Sunday. And if it wasn't horrible, they would come back the next Sunday, maybe go to Sunday school, and then typically they would make the decision to join the church in formal membership. And on that second Sunday, you walk down the aisle, you get presented to the whole congregation. It was a frightening affair for so many people. And it's not like that anymore. It's actually not been like that in a long time for multiple reasons I'm not going to go into in this video. But I see churches so many times still thinking this is the way that it works. When I was church planning, which I did for 9 years, we saw hundreds of people come through our doors over the course of those 8-9 years. And we learned a lot about that process. We learned a lot about intentional guest integration. And that's where a lot of these things I'm coming to you, they started off with my experience back then, but I've seen them work in tons and tons of churches over the last few years as I've helped other pastors figure these things out. Now, first thing, Tyler Smith in his book Boomerang, which is a great book, I think you should go read it. He says in there that only 10 to 16% of first-time guests actually come back a second time. So just right there, then you realize, the odds are actually really, really low. But I don't necessarily agree with that, because my experience, at least when I was in a local church, is we had a really solid guest integration system. And I feel like we brought that percentage up so much. And it's your guest integration system that does that. Now, another caveat here, your Sunday morning experience needs to actually be enjoyable, and the people at your church actually need to be nice and hospitable. That has to be going on. We're not talking about that in this video, but what I want to talk with you is specifically about this integration in a way that we have been developing an integration system. I've been helping churches roll it out that has been, incredibly helpful and effective for them. And it's not that intense. It's not that busy. I love Tyler Smith's book, Boomerang, but he's the CEO of Texton Church, and they recommend a lot. They recommend a lot to a point to where I feel like it would actually be a turn off to somebody who's probably 35 or younger. I've developed something much more simple, and I'm going to talk through it, and then I'm going to show you how I use a program called Trello to implement it. But there's one concept I need you to understand, and that's the concept of levers. Think about a lever. When you pull a lever, there's a very specific action that is taken. We need to design guest integration systems with levers in mind. We don't want to just info dump all of the things about our church onto somebody after they've spent an hour with us for the first time. That is not a good strategy whatsoever at all. Instead, we need to be thinking about what intentional levers do we need to be pulling in order to get a very specific thing to happen. And if a person comes to your church one time, your only goal is for them to feel comfortable coming a second time. And if they come to your church a second time, the only goal really is okay, can they come to our church a third time? And if they've come to your church 3 times, there's a strong likelihood they're actually thinking about, what does it mean for me to be part of this church? What does it mean for me to have spiritual relationships with these people? What does it mean for me to follow Jesus alongside of them? And also, what does it mean for me to call that person up there my pastor? But they're not thinking about that necessarily at the first visit. The first visit, they're thinking, hey, am I safe here? Can I even come here? That second visit's more about, hey, can I see myself becoming part of things here? And that third visit, a lot of times just say, yeah, this is a thing for me. And I think that me and my family or whoever I'm there with, we can see this happening. We want to make sure we do that. So think about the lever pulls, because your only lever pull is going to be getting them to come to that next step on the line. Sometimes the analogy I use is if you're outside in the woods, and I hunt a lot, so I'm out in the woods a lot, and you come across a creek and you have to cross the creek. I don't like jumping across a 10-foot creek on my own. I'm going to find a place where there's some stepping stones. There might be a tree crossing the creek. There's some high spots where there's a little bit of ground peeking up, and I'm going to kind of hopscotch my way across that creek. That's the way we have to be thinking when we design integration systems. We have to be giving people places to step as they go along the journey. So for your first visit, and we're not going to talk about how to get information, all that sort of stuff on this video. But for that first visit, remember, the only goal is to get them to feel comfortable coming a second time. And there's only 2 things I think you should do to follow up on that organizationally. The first is a text from the pastor, a text or an email. At this stage, I think all you need from that person is just one of those 2 things, a cell phone number or an email address. You don't need to be getting everything at that first level. But on Monday morning, there needs to be a follow-up from the pastor that just simply recognizes the person is there, and then to say, hey, I'm praying for you this week. If there's anything specific, please let me know. You're inviting them into a relationship. You're inviting them into that pastoral relationship that they are going to have if they become a part of your church. I've also found that most of the time these texts get responded to if only if it's a, hey, we really enjoyed ourselves. Thank you so much. There's going to be that relational bridge being made. The second thing is some sort of communication from the church, not from the pastor, either email or text. It's simply, thank you so much for coming to worship. We enjoyed your presence and you made us better. If you have here's a few questions that people might have about our church. And here's the thing. Think about developing an FAQ that's not like, I want to become a member, or I want to find out, is there a 4-year-old girl basket weaving class? It's literally, what are the questions that somebody might have about your church specifically? And I think either make a page on your website about this or use another tool. And I would say no more than 3 or 4 of these questions, but literally answer the questions you feel like somebody in your community might have specifically about your church, and that gets emailed or text to that person, Tuesday or so, maybe Wednesday morning at the latest, and that's it. That's it. You also need to be saving a way that you can see when people come for the first time. I'm going to show you that when I show you this Trello system that I like to use for this. But that's it. First visit. Your only goal, second visit. The second time, if they come again the second time, you notate them inside as a second time visit. So you know when that date was. So you can learn how long does it typically take people to go between first visit and second visit. That second visit, if you only have the cell or you only have the email, one of those goals then is to get the other one. So now you have both that cell and that email address. I'm also assuming you're using a church management system or a database like Planning Center at this point in time. But you need to get one of those 2 things. And then here is at that second visit, hopefully the pastor's kept up a little bit of a connection point. If the pastor's not had any communication with them between the first visit and the second visit, that second visit's a great time for the pastor to fall, hey, great having you again. Would love to have a longer conversation with you at some point in time. Really, as you're inviting them into a relationship. And the next thing is, if that household, that person, that family, regardless of where they are, they need to then be connected to another leader. So if they have kids, they need to be connected to the kids ministry. If they have youth, they need to be connected to the youth minister. They need to be connected to somebody who's over adult discipleship, because you're building that relational connection with them again. And then another organizational communication that's welcoming them after the second visit, letting them know maybe about, hey, this is when our discipleship times are. And also we have a recurring event specifically for people who are new to our church. The next date is this date. We would love for you to think about being part of that. But remember, that whole goal of a second visit is to get them to come to a third visit. On that third visit, by then, hopefully, they're now in communication with the pastor. They've had an initial touch point with some other ministry leader that they can build a relational connection with. On that third visit, the only follow-up is this. I would create an email drip sequence in something like MailChimp or ConvertKit or Constant Contact. There's tons of places that offer drip sequences now. And I would send them a specific invitation to that welcome to church event. And if you can do that over the course of a couple of 3 emails where you really then begin like drilling into the unique vision of your local church and what does it mean to be part of your church in a spiritual way, have to be part of spiritual community there, that needs to be part of that drip sequence. Now let's talk about this welcome to church event. This is not a membership class. This is not a time where they're going to sign up for a bunch of stuff. The only goal of this class is saying, hey, this person's come to worship with us 3 times. They like us enough to come back 3 times. So what we want to do is just connect them to more relationships. And so you've got the folks that are new over the last few months of the church are part of that class. The church staff needs to be there, and also a handful of key leadership. What I normally say is order a bunch of pizzas after church on a Sunday and do this directly after church. So you're inviting them to come back to church for that 4th time, at least by then, but also for them to be part of this event and all the things that entails. And the only goal, really at the end of that welcome to church event, is for them to be connected even deeper into the life of the church. Now, that's a really simple 3-step follow-up sequence. But if your church begins to see visitors, if you have more than 1 or 2 a week, this actually can be kind of complicated to keep up with. That's why I'm a big fan of using Trello as a tool to manage new people. So we're about to go over to my desk and I'm about to give you a screen share and just kind of walk you through what it looks like to use Trello for this. All right, so let's walk through this Trello system. I'm about to kind of take you into screen share and show you the way I like to do this and why Trello matters so much for this. So we're sitting in my Trello template that I use to teach people about using Trello for guest integration. Yeah, that's a lot of words there. But I like Trello because this is visual. And I've got a couple of like fake families sitting inside of this already to show you why the visual thing matters so much. Because, if you only have 1 or 2 guests every month, you could probably run this without a system. But if you start having 2 to 3 guests a Sunday, and what most research shows is 5% of your worship attendance on a Sunday, if that's guests, that's really what you should be aiming for. So if that's the case, you might have this thing, chock full of people adding in 4 or 5 new people every Sunday, and it can get laborious at that matter. So we're here. I like to use old country families and country singers as I teach people about this. So we're going to do the Cash family for an example. I've got this whole template built out in a card inside of Trello, sitting in on the far the list on the far left. Imagine Trello like a giant whiteboard, and you can stack sticky notes and move them around everywhere. That's what I love about this. So we're going to start this as the Cash family. I've got this template card created already, and we're going to add them into the first time visit. So create that card, it gets moved over. So boom, we can do a couple of details. John and June Cash, 2 kids with them, a few older from a previous marriage. So you got that there. You can save that date. They came, let's say, on March the 9th for the first time. We're going to put March 9th right there. So we know automatically. We talked about the first time visit system and those levers to pull. So they filled out a card. You got that checked. They're entered in your database. I think you need to be using a database for this sort of thing. And you've done all the things that we talked about in the video already. So we see we've got 3 families right there have attended first time. That's driving me crazy that we don't have checks filled out. But here's the deal. You should also know that at some point in time, if you don't see all those checks filled out, that meant somebody dropped a ball somewhere and your system isn't working. So you see the visits right there. We'll say the Cash family decides to come back later on in April. Make a note here, second visit April 15th, pastor talked to them. They work in entertainment and are out a lot. So boom, you got a little note right there. They've got a kid. John Carter's young, and they got a kid right there. And so we do that whole follow-up. Youth pastor connected with June about the kids. They are looking for opportunities for them. So you're leaving notes. You're leaving yourself a breadcrumb trail across the place. Then they come back a third time. So, you pop in here. You hit your system, work your system. They will be out on the road for the next event, but are planning on coming. They enjoy our church. So you're dropping in these notes because multiple people can be using the same Trello board at the same time. And so after that third visit, I'd move them to here. They've not attended the integration event yet. When they have, they get moved over into have attended the integration event. Sometimes you might have people that come to church a couple of times and don't really respond, and that they're out of the loop. We'll take the Jennings family. Waylon, I'm sorry, you quit going to church, and you move over into opted out. There's something about just seeing this and understanding that Trello gives you this broad basis to see where new people are in your church system. This was a super quick deep dive, but it's one that I find to be really, really helpful, especially if you start seeing guests very frequently. When I was church planting, our first version of this system, I still have the Trello board right now. I look at it. There are dozens of names across multiple lists. And every one of those names I remember, and I see names on there that actually turned out to be fantastic leaders for our church. And also see names on there of people that they came once or twice and they never came again. But there's something about managing this in a visual way that I think is much stronger than just using your normal church database. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm really passionate about this because I believe that the biggest thing that people are looking for outside of Jesus Christ is they're looking for a group of people to follow Jesus along with. I'm a massive fan of the local church, and I want you and your church to understand how to integrate these new people really, really well, how to honor and be faithful to the folks that Jesus has put inside of y'all's orbit and inside of just your own just spiritual authority and leadership that you have. If you like content like this, make sure we come hang out in the comments, subscribe to that email account, and let's just begin a conversation about what does it mean to integrate people into the life of your church.